Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode of the Embellish Podcast, a podcast focused on product stories, product storytellers, interesting brand ambassadors, and any other tangent that I happen to come up with. Whether you're a bourbon fan, a geek, a casual observer, or someone just floating through this channel, you're sure to waste a few minutes listening to what I have to say, and I hope you find it interesting. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists, and if you can't find me there, please email me at embellishpod@gmail.com, and I'll get that taken care of. I also generally live stream the recording of these episodes on YouTube on Wednesday nights around 9:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Tonight, obviously, I'm not because I'm going to be out of town on Wednesday, so I'm pre-recording this episode. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's also a place to pick up these links, episode details, even some one-off tasting notes. Today is Sunday, February the 27th. I'm pre-recording this for this upcoming Wednesday. And tonight we're going to be talking about Eave's Blind, which is a subscription service that I had personally subscribed to last year. Actually, I began the subscription in December of 2020, and the first offering came in the spring of 2021. If you are unfamiliar with what that is, Eave's Blind is the brainchild of Marianne Eaves. Marianne Eaves is one of those people that if you are unsure of who she is, you're probably new to bourbon. But she's got quite the name within the industry. She's got a lot of things going on, has worked for some of the bigs, worked for Brown-Forman at one point in time, and then with Castle and Key being named, if I remember correctly, the first female master distiller in the state of Kentucky. Since then, she has gone off on her own, and she is doing consulting and doing a host of other things. But this is one of the first big projects that weren't directly affiliated with any other brand or any other company that had purchased her consulting services. This was her own idea. And so what the beginning of this particular offering is an idea to be able to take people who are maybe whiskey geeks or aficionados or people who just want to know more about whiskey specifically and bring them into the fold. The idea was for her to provide a series of tastings over the course of the year. For the particular tier that I purchased, I got 2 300 milliliter bottles per subscription or per quarter. The first quarter came through. We got samples. With that, there comes a digital offering as well. There's a whole bunch of stuff that kind of goes on with it. We can kind of talk about all of those things, but we'll start with kind of breaking down the things that I think went well, the things that I think that maybe didn't go so well with it, and so, just kind of feel out how things go with that. We'll start with the marketing portion of this. It began as a social media push. There were a series of different advertisements that existed within Instagram and a host of other places. But I personally came across it through Instagram to begin with. And from day one, they got their packaging and their delivery mechanisms perfect. The idea behind each shipment that you received was pretty top notch. I'll say that. So for the service, there were 2 tiers that existed for members to participate in. One was the apprentice, and the other was the aficionado. With the apprentice, you got 2 300 milliliter bottles. With the aficionado, you got a different offering, but I don't know exactly what they got because I started with the apprentice offering myself since I was paying out of pocket, and this was a thing that I was doing for my own interest. And it was also something that I wanted to be able to kind of come back to after we made it all the way through it and give a review, as a part of this podcast. And so I began this podcast around the same time that this particular offer came available. And so I thought, hey, we'll carry these parallel to each other. So I'll start with one of the first bits of maybe swag. I don't know if you want to call it swag. It's technically not swag. I guess maybe I purchased it. But as a part of the initial package, the very first one that you get, every member got 2 black Glencairn glasses. And they look like any other black Glencairn glass that you've seen. One of the little marketing differences, and we'll see if we can get that to show through, is this symbol that exists on a host of the different marketing offerings that Marianne had created for this particular thing. So it's all black. The idea behind it being all black was that we would pour from the bottles that are shipped in into a black Glencairn. So we weren't going to be paying nearly as much attention to the color of it, because that's something that whiskey geeks, whiskey nerds kind of will be the first thing they'll look at is that, what is the viscosity of it and what is the color of it. And sometimes those things don't translate through to the palate. The idea was to make this as blind as possible for the person who purchased it. And blind is difficult to do for a host of reasons. Like like the idea of sending to some human being the bottles with almost no idea of what's actually in it can be troubling to the people who would sign off on packaging for it. But then beyond that, the actual offerings came in a bottle that looks like this, and it's this flat matte black color with the one of the marketing designs that comes along with it, and then on the front of it, it'll have some lettering to identify the sample, to identify the proof, to identify the potential age of it. And I think I said they were 300 milliliters. I was wrong. They're 100 milliliters. So if that's what I said to begin with, I was incorrect. Now, one of the things that kind of goes into play is that it's very hard to sell a bottle like this without any identifying information. And this is something that most of us didn't know for the duration of the offering, is that all of your government warning was actually on the back side of this black label that exists that that we used. They were sent to us, they were put on the back side, and I noticed it because I thought, these are really, really nice bottles. When I emptied the first one, I was like, I can reuse this. I can take this as, samples for other people. I can do some other thing with it because they're fantastic. They've got a nice feel to them. They're pretty hefty as far as their quality. But there's also no clue as to what it is. It just says, who bottled it, which is Hoops Vineyard in California. So the idea was we get all of these things completely blind. We taste through them, and Marianne would provide notes for us. And this is maybe where it sort of falls down for me. And you get a suspicion that it's entirely possible that when they began this process, they were unsure of what their technological needs were going to be able to make this work. They started with the website where there was a membership for people to be able to log in, and there were a series of problems getting people access to the right things, which is perfectly fine. It's the first time you've ever done something like this. You have to learn how to iron out the kinks to it. But the packages would regularly show up, sort of on a random time interval. The first one was obviously late, but of course this was launched during a pandemic, which makes things significantly more difficult to achieve. As far as logistics and getting things out, with the uniqueness of the offering, with the uniqueness of the bottles, with the uniqueness of the glass, with the uniqueness of the marketing packaging that they sent along with it, everything took a little bit longer than they had originally intended to, which is okay. Most whiskey people are relatively patient. We're used to waiting 4+ years for something to be mature enough to drink, so we have no problem waiting another month or two to be able to pick up the offering that Marianne was trying to put together for us. So once the website launched, there was a members area where you could go in and you could look at tasting notes. But one of the things that I did enjoy about it, and I don't know if it was intended or not, is that I would regularly get the samples well before the tasting notes were going to be available on the website. So it forced me to either do one of two things. I would either wait until the tasting notes were made available, or I would start sampling them myself and capturing my own tasting notes to then compare against what Marianne and her team had put together for us. One of the other things that I found difficult about their technological offering was that this particular website was not optimized for mobile, for iPad. It was very much a website that needed to be utilized on a web browser. Chrome seemed to do all right with it, but anytime I would try to open it on my iPhone or my iPad, the way the technology was put forward didn't seem to work super well. But once again, that's not necessarily the intended audience. Maybe is not expecting to have that. So when we start breaking down what's actually available on the website, we'll see that she did a series of things which I found super interesting. I really enjoyed, maybe I should have started with this, is I really enjoyed this particular subscription service. I know it was a little bit costly when you consider the volume of the things that you got as far as liquid, but when you consider the volume of things that you got as far as a knowledge base, I think it's a pretty good deal. And then beyond that, the 2022 version of it is not going to be available. They're going to do something different. And then 2023, it may come back again. And hopefully they'll have some of those other things sort of ironed out as far as what they're doing. But whenever you log into the website, you'll be able to see a series of tasting notes. And for the first offering, she gave the ideas of how to taste and what to taste. And some of the, I don't want to call it insider information, may not be the right thing, but more scientific information behind it. But you could run through and see tasting notes, things about proof, things about recipes, read about TTB classes and type designations, and a whole host of other things. Really, really, really interesting things for the person who's more than a casual observer of bourbon. But then we'll hop in and we'll actually look. And this is N0101BP, which was actually one of the first offerings of the 2021 for us. It was in the spring offering. Whenever you log in, you get the opportunity to go to this particular bottle and you see the age range that exists. And so on the front of this, it says it's 4.2 at 61.45 alcohol by volume. But it's actually somewhere between 4.2 and 4.7 years old for the blend that exists. And then when we walk through the tasting notes, she gave us several different things. There's a still glass version, there are feeling notes, there's grain recipes, there's yeast, there's barrel recipes, there's a whole host of stuff, and you finally find out the size of the blend that created these particular samples. There was a sort of a hidden surprise to come at the end of this particular subscription service, but we'll get to that later on. So for this first one, like I said, we ran through. I said that she gave some notes on a still glass. A still glass is from a glass that has not been swirled or agitated of any kind. And you'll find most bourbon people, they'll put it in and they'll swirl it around to get some air kind of mixed in with it and get some of the ethanol off of it or whatever. She gives still notes and non-still notes. And so you get things that might happen when you first give it a whiff if you have not done anything to stir it up. She talks about things like adding water and retronasal effects and a whole catalog's worth of information for a person who maybe knows a little bit about tasting, maybe knows nothing about tasting, or even for people who know a whole lot about tasting. But we get the idea of what it comes out of a still glass, the aroma, the palate, the finish, what happens whenever water is added to it. And then we get a grain recipe. What was somewhat intriguing to me was reading about the yeast. We actually got to read about the particular type of yeast that was used for this offering that was sent to us, this very first offering that we looked at. Then when we look at the other one from the exact same offering, this one gets, like I said, it says 3.2 plus on the front of it, but this one ends up being a 3.2 to 6.5 year blend that existed. Same sort of situation. Still glass, aroma, palate, finish. And I'm not going to give away what any of the tasting notes were because that was a part of the program. That was a part of the offering for folks who happened to participate in this particular subscription service. Same thing, but this one had a ton more information around the yeast specifically. And this is the kind of the through line for this particular subscription is we're learning more and more and more about the distillation process. Now, from what I understand, I got the apprentice version. There was the aficionado series. They got even more information from what I understand. And so if you're wanting that next step up, you get, I believe, a couple more samples, maybe some water, the type of water that she was using to proof things down, and some more in-depth notes. Now, as well as having these tasting notes, there was a series of videos that were put out or opportunities to join her for a live-ish type tasting. Trying to find the appropriate platform to do those things on is probably difficult, and I think that's what those are some of probably the key learnings that they'll have. But it seemed like that they had a relatively relatively active online community. And so that might have been something interesting to kind of toss in there as well. And so if I were to think about things that I would like to see done slightly better, it would be the logistics behind it. The, sort of knowing when things are shipping, things shipping on an appropriate time frame, and then maybe having an actual forum where members can interact with each other, as well as Marianne interacting, or any other person she happens to bring in, any other whiskey aficionado that can help grow this particular type of thing. It might be a great opportunity to have an asynchronous type of communication, a forum, a chat stream, a Discord, something where we can all sort of talk about what we experienced as we were going through it, because it can be intimidating to join. I've done a series of tastings here recently with some master distillers through my friends over at the Bourbon Lens, and in that, it can be somewhat intimidating to try to give tasting notes to the master distiller or to the master blender or to the person who put it together, because they know what should and should not be there. And while taste is subjective to me specifically, I'm not a professional. I am just a guy that sits in a room and stares into a camera by himself once a week to talk about whiskey. And so who am I to say what should or should not exist within the flavor profiles? But it might be a great opportunity for some of us to interact with each other, maybe having a Zoom call where we can put together ourselves, or something like that, to allow the community to interact with each other. Now, I realize there's literally hundreds of people that did this, but you might end up with 20 or 25 people that are interested in actually talking to each other and having those types of conversations. Now, I said that there was also sort of this undercurrent of a surprise that kind of got put out at the very, very end of this offering. And I really appreciated this. I thoroughly enjoyed it. From the bottles that I tasted, there were maybe one or two that I would personally seek out and be like, hey, this is a thing that I want. But that was one of the big problems with this is a blind sampling. We have no idea what we have. And from our initial understanding of what was being done here, we were never going to have an opportunity to buy any of this, because these were blends that she was creating in her mobile blending lab that she was trying to put together at that point in time. What came out at the end is that she had partnered with a series of distilleries to create these, and we won't even call them blends. They end up being, I guess we will call them blends. They end up being, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 barrel blends, for us to be able to sort of pull back the curtain at the end of it and say, these are all coming from distilleries that are outside the state of Kentucky. People like Watershed and Kings County and 291 and Oregon Spirits and a whole host of other people, Journeyman, and I'll leave somebody off, so I'm not going to try to run the entire list. But she had created blends with each one of these non-Kentucky distilleries to not only provide a unique tasting experience for us, but to be able to kind of showcase that bourbon does not have to come from Kentucky, and rightfully so. Some of the best bourbon doesn't come from Kentucky. And so that was sort of the kind of the thing at the end was, all right, now let me tell you what all you tasted, and then make those bottles available to the people who participated in the service first. The folks who had been a part of the blind program got a chance to buy a bottle of each one of them, or more than one of each one of them if they wanted to, before they were put on sale to the public. Now these bottles have made it to public, and that's I was sort of waiting for my own personal review to hit for these bottles to be made available to the public for an extended period of time, so that way people had an opportunity to purchase and taste and do all these things, and I wasn't giving anything away that might have existed. And I'm not going to get into any of the tasting notes, because those are things that we all purchased as a part of our subscription service. What she provided us with is a wealth of information and understanding how a master distiller, master blender, whoever ends up making a blend, how they go about doing those things, how they construct their tasting notes, how they identify the things that yeast should do with things, the things that cooperage should do with a particular barrel, and then how you put these blends together. And, I enjoyed the fact that I didn't know how old things were exactly whenever I looked at things, because that's another thing that whiskey geeks get wrapped up in, is how old is the bottle that I'm tasting. It was a really, really interesting experience. When it comes available again in 2023, I don't know if I would do it again. The only way I might do it again is if I had an interested partner, friend, whatever, that said, hey, I'd like to do this with you. For a number of different reasons. There are a limited number of seats that are available to this, and I thoroughly enjoyed the process, but I would absolutely hate to take the seat from another person who could experience this for the first time as well. But beyond that, it was a little bit expensive whenever I consider the whiskey purchased. It wasn't expensive if I consider the knowledge that was gained as a result of it. But I'm likely never going to be a master blender, distiller, or even a human being that works within the industry. And so while the knowledge is interesting for me to kind of put in my back pocket and talk about, do I need to do it again? I don't know. But then again, whenever it comes to the end of 2022 and they open up subscription, is my FOMO going to eat me alive and I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do it again? There's a good chance that happens as well. I think it's a great opportunity for any person who is just getting into whiskey, who's been into whiskey for a while, that has not had an opportunity to sit around a titan in the industry and understand their process. It's a great way for you to gain knowledge without having to go to a really long class, and you end up with some really nice whiskey and some really nice glassware and some nice marketing materials, some things that somebody took a high degree of effort to put together in a very intentional fashion. This is a really nice set. If you were looking for a present to give someone who's into whiskey at the end of this year and this subscription service is over, this is absolutely a thing that you could purchase for a person, and it would be unlike anything else that they can get on the market. There's a number of different whiskey subscriptions that exist out there, but usually you're getting a whole bottle or maybe 2 whole bottles every quarter, which is great as well, but you're not getting the added content that Marianne and her team took the time to create. You're not getting the experience, so to speak, that is coming along with the bottles. That's the thing with whiskey, is that when the bottle's gone, the bottle's gone. You have the experience of the bottle, but that's it. But a service like this is also providing the knowledge, and the knowledge can stay with you forever once the bottle is completely empty. So that's all I've really got. I think we're going to make this a quick video. This, be under 30 minutes. Everybody may like that, may not like that. Don't really care. But thanks for joining me tonight or today or whenever you happen to be listening or watching this. I hope you found this particular episode entertaining or informative. If you did, please leave me a review or a comment on whatever platform that you're consuming this on. You can hit me up on social media on Twitter or Instagram at EmbellishPod, and give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com, and with all of my links, accounts, contact details, whatever. I'll be back again next week with another new offering for you. So until then, cheers.